So with a new Spider-Man game on the way, where Venom's a main villain again, I thought it would be a good idea to go back and revisit my childhood Spider-Man game, where Venom was the main antagonist. And luckily enough, oh, it's a whole thing. There were a lot of Spider-Man games coming out when I was younger, but for some reason, I had my eye on this one. Most likely because, I mean, it was on the GameCube. And even though it's on my favorite childhood console, this game is just, like, it's just dated. Like, what year did this come out? Hold on. Yeah, okay. That tracks. So in this game, Venom isn't an alien. He was created in a lab by Peter and Eddie's dad as a cure for cancer. But instead, they messed up and they created a horrible monster. Anyway, odds are you know the rest of the story. Peter becomes Venom. Venom leaves Peter for Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock doesn't like Spider-Man. And there you go. The game actually starts in a pretty cool way. You're immediately fighting Venom and confronting him, which is great. But I ran into a problem because this game can be hard to hear sometimes, and there are no subtitles. All things considered, this is a pretty cool intro to the game. You're immediately fighting the main antagonist, and other than the flashing lights, I really like this section. But then the cops show up, and Mr. Brock backs up into this electrical wire, gets electrocuted, the screen just fades to black, it doesn't really tell you what happens to him, you just kind of start the normal game from here. Okay, so while playing, I noticed something. I really want you to listen to Peter Parker's voice in this scene.
Alright, I'm gonna run by home and grab my web shooters.
He has the same voice actor as Mac from Foster's Home, and that just, like, made me happy, so I needed to share it. So the controls in this game are a little weird. He's insanely fast. You have to press a button to grab the walls, and also his jump height is so insanely high, it makes the camera hard to control. So the first mission in this game has you fighting the Shocker, I think this is the Shocker. He's just kind of a generic goon. It shows you the web shooting ability, which is just kind of a JPEG they strapped into the air. It's very bizarre looking. This guy's pretty easy. You just use your webs, you don't punch him, and once you web him up enough, he like has a mechanic malfunction, and it's over. That's all there is. He's not very interesting. He's just there to teach you that you gotta shoot your webs at people. So after that, it introduces you to the generic thugs of the game.
You've got a dog? That's a Homer!
Why are they British? Seriously though, we're in New York City. Why is the generic New York street thugs a bunch of British people? So ignoring all that, in this game there's a few side quests you can do in between missions. And I mean, when I say in between missions, I mean the game comes to a crawling halt because you have to complete a specific amount of these every level to continue playing the story. None of these are particularly enjoyable, as it consists of doing races where you have to go through these giant Spider-Man spears in a time trial. These honestly give big Superman 64 energy because the controls are so wonky. Nowhere near as bad as Superman 64, but still really odd feeling. And who would get Spider-Man to start on this, you may ask? None other than the good old Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four. A man who can literally fly challenges a 15-year-old teenager in races across New York City. Seems a little unfair, but you do you, King. There's also combat trials, which are a little uncomfortable due to the fact that there's absolutely no music during these sections.
Time to make a name in the world.
For a game that has such an intense soundtrack for just swinging around the city, you'd think they'd want something playing for when you're running around and beating up a bunch of goons, but no, they just want it to feel as bizarre as possible. Also, there's one more where you simply save civilians across good ol' NYC, but sometimes Spider-Man doesn't always seem too enthusiastic to go around and do this.
I'm not gonna make it!
I have to go to the Daily Bugle.
So one of these civilian saving missions I absolutely love. You know how in the new game Spider-Man can stop runaway cars and it's a really cinematic and cool? Well, let me show you how he does it in this game. Anyway, so one of the main draws to this game is that after you complete a Spider-Man section, you sometimes can switch to playing as Venom, which just pretty much means you go around and beat up a bunch of Silver Sable soldiers until the game tells you it's time to go somewhere else and do it again. Venom actually has this kind of interesting mechanic where he's always slowly losing health, and you have to eat some of the civilians running around to gain it back. Now, the game makes sure that you remember this mechanic, because the first time it teaches you to do this, it has you eat a child that has just been left on the streets of New York. You find a 6-year-old, probably lost and scared, and you eat him alive. But, I mean, at least the good thing is that after you do that, you run into Wolverine at a bar? Now, while Venom vs. Wolverine is super cool in concept, the fight ends super abruptly, and Wolverine is just never brought up or seen again. And this is pretty much just how the game goes. You do some sort of trailing or combat mission, it ends in a boss fight, and a lot of these characters are never brought up again and feel like they have no importance to the plot whatsoever, except Silver Sable. She actually comes back quite a bit a few times. The next mission has you dealing with the Rhino, and let me tell you, I think this is the scariest Rhino fight I have ever played in a Spider-Man game. This man is insanely fast, just the body the size of a forklift. This running attack he has right here, while isn't hard to deal with, it's absolutely horrifying. You get stuck with this giant man in a parking lot and pretty much have to just jump around to avoid everything he does, which wouldn't be a problem if Spider-Man didn't jump so damn high, because now on top of fighting the Rhino, you also have to fight the camera the whole time because you're consistently moving at the speed of sound. Luckily though, I've trained for this moment. I've taken all of the skills I've learned and strategically applied them to this fight. But once again, just like Wolverine, you take down the Rhino and he's never to be seen of again. So anyway, Peter and Eddie just get into it again. Silver Sable shows up, kidnaps Eddie Brock, and then we get into what I think is the worst mission of the whole game. The idea is that these guys are trying to test how powerful the symbiote suit is, so they hire Electro to see if Venom can catch him. The thing about this trailing mission is it's so unbelievably long, and Electro just keeps repeating the same dialogue lines over and over.
My grandma moves faster than you. I thought this was a chase, not a freaking walk in the park. I thought this was a chase, not a freaking walk in the park. I thought this was a chase, not a freaking walk in the park. My grandma moves faster than you.
So I naturally assumed, oh, you have to go catch him somehow. No. You follow him until he decides to just stop in Times Square, and you finally just fight him. One cool thing about this boss fight is Electro consistently heals himself on these TV screens in Times Square. You're supposed to be able to destroy them somehow, but I just ended up letting him absorb all of them, so he kind of just ran out of stuff to regain his health with, and then I won. After that, this Wasp guy flies around the city and steals this vial labeled Sandman. This would lead you to believe that Sandman would eventually appear as a villain in the game. However, later, Venom just kind of kills this guy, and I don't think the vial is ever brought up again. It was probably a mission that got scrapped during development, but it's kind of just bizarre that it got left in. Green Goblin also makes an appearance in this game, but there's not really a ton worth mentioning other than this is the section I got stuck in as a kid, so everything from here on out is all new stuff for me. Silver Sable shows up again and kidnaps Peter. She's apparently pretty good at that. 2 out of 2 so far. So after Peter's captured, these scientist guys start to experiment on him by injecting another symbiote into him. Now, if I ever got to this part as a kid, I would have thought this was the coolest shit ever. Now, Peter busts through this door and you find out that he's been injected with Carnage. Now, as a child, this would have been a completely mind-blowing scenario, but as an adult, the only thing I could really think of is that I wish I made it this far when I was younger, because I would have just enjoyed it a lot more. Venom finally ends up absorbing Peter, because apparently Peter had leftover parts of Venom still in him, which is why Eddie Brock has been so obsessed with him this whole time. After Venom is finally complete, which you can tell based on the fact that he has the logo at the end of the game, you finally end up in the last stage where Eddie Brock is just trying to kill this man in a helicopter by pushing it as slowly as possible off this building. But after it's all over, the last cutscene of the game shows Peter still being worried about Eddie being on the streets, but little does he know, Eddie just went to the prison where this helicopter dude was at and just killed him anyway, so the whole last stage was kind of completely pointless. So the question I had in the very beginning was, does this game still hold up? And the answer is not really. The game was hit pretty hard by Father Time. You can collect different suits in the game, but I don't see much of an incentive to go do that. All things said, though, it was a fun trip down memory lane to go back and play this game I played when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And if you're having a nostalgic feeling for this game and you want to go back to it, it's probably worth it. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's just clearly dated. Now, I don't think I would ever recommend this game to somebody who's never played it before, but like I said already, if you want to go back and revisit this game, just go ahead and do it. It's like not that bad of a time.